I'm going to get started. We've got a lot to cover. So Rebecca Ranieri of Central Michigan University and I, Dawn Winans of Kettering University, would like to welcome everyone out to the Michigan Academic Library Association's STEM IG webinar today. Excited to report it's a full house. All 100 seats are taken, and we've got people from all over the country, which is even more exciting. It's going to be a 1-hour webinar, and we have 2 speakers. It's over online learning tools for STEM library instruction. And our first speaker today is Eric Tanz, and he has 2 roles at Michigan State University. The first is Science Collections Coordinator, and the second is Environmental Sciences Librarian. And as the Science Collections Coordinator, he manages and supervises the librarians, overseeing their collection development, instruction, liaison work across science disciplines. And in his position as environmental sciences librarian, he is the liaison to the Fisheries and Wildlife Department and the Environmental Science and Policy Program. Eric is going to discuss today the collaborative efforts between librarians and science faculty to create a science-focused information literacy learning module for non-majors on critical evaluation of science information resources. And after Eric, we're going to have Ed Eckel from Western Michigan University. Ed is the engineering and applied sciences librarian there. He primarily works with freshman engineering students, helping them to learn research and applied science topics, how to come to applied science topics and write their research papers. And Ed will discuss how we set up a flipped classroom approach to teaching information search skills for freshman engineering writing courses. And I don't want to take up too much of their time, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Eric. And thank you guys so much.
All right, thank you, Dawn. And I will just share my screen here. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Eric Tanz, and my portion of today's webinar presentation is a case study examining my experience developing a scalable online scientific information literacy module. For the outline of my presentation, I'll start by discussing some background information and the module development process. I'll then speak to how we incorporated the ACRL information literacy framework into the project and finish talking about how we as librarians contributed to the project and some lessons learned and future plans. And I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues, Sarah Miller, our librarian for interdisciplinary teaching and learning initiatives, and Elizabeth Webster, our teaching and learning librarian here at MSU, who were both instrumental in developing both the module and the slides that I'm using today. So some context about Michigan State University. We are a large research university with approximately 51,000 students, 50,000 undergraduate and 11,000 graduate students. And we partnered with the instructors for our CIS-GS courses. Those are integrative studies in general science. And these are introductory science courses for non-science majors. These courses include nearly 30 large lecture sections with 100 to 200 students each, and they're divided into up to 80 lab sections of approximately 25 students each. So it was one of our CIS-GS instructors that first approached us about expressing a need for improving student scientific literacy and reasoning skills. And this was inspired by a student submitting a paper citing the rapper B.O.B.'s Flat Earth assertions in a class assignment. So if you aren't familiar, this rapper has been very active on social media promoting the idea that the world is flat and that there is an international cabal of global elites that's responsible for perpetuating the idea of a round Earth. And his argument essentially boils down to, because the horizon looks flat, the Earth must be flat. So the instructor was understandably concerned that a student would cite something like this as evidence for a scientific assignment for a science class. So he approached Sarah Miller, my colleague, about partnering with the libraries to help solve this problem. So some considerations that we had to think about while we were considering this was, given the total number of students involved, issues of scalability were a primary consideration. The library obviously lacks the staffing resources to visit each class in person, but the number of students enrolled in these courses provided an opportunity for a significant impact. And also, the various courses lacked a unifying assignment. Instead, each course designed their own, with some requiring the use of scholarly literature and others not. So the process of developing the module extended through the fall semester of 2016. We met with a group of 4 CISGS instructors and got an idea of their desires for the module. Our conversations eventually settled on critical thinking regarding media reports of scientific studies. This was inspired by John Oliver's report on the topic in a segment on his show Last Week Tonight, and we were able to secure the rights to embed a short clip of the segment directly into the module, which we were pretty excited about. So we identified 4 media reports specifically mentioned in the video segment and then found the original articles that they were referring to. We then paired those articles with the broadcast transcripts of media reports on those articles that we found using LexisNexis, now called Nexus Uni. And then we created a series of questions asking students to compare the original article and the media report. So the media claims topics included that a glass of wine is the equivalent to an hour at the gym, that sugar causes cancer growth, that pizza is the most addictive junk food, and that late night snacking damages memory. So this, I apologize that this is so small, but this is a screenshot of the module. It currently is a learning object within Desire to Learn, which is the course management software that we use here at MSU. That allows for some easy integration into any course. So we also have links to the video, links to the transcripts, and the reflection questions right here, which I'll return to in a couple of slides. And this is an example of the media transcript on the right-hand side and the scientific study related to on the left-hand side. These are for the wine and exercise topic. So the transcript was, again, it was found in LexisNexis, and it was from a morning talk show in Las Vegas. So we included an excerpt, and then we also linked to the full transcript for further context. Our module questions, we asked in the module focus on the 3 aspects, the author, the article, and the publication. And we had the students answer all the questions about both the news and the scientific article. So for the author's questions, we asked, who is the author? What is the author's credentials? What is the author trying to accomplish? And what is their likely motivation? The article questions were, what claims and conclusions does the article make? How are these claims supported? And what is the evidence? And does the article use subjective language? And does the article present anything to make itself more credible? And the publication question, who published the article? Where does it appear? Does the publication have an interest in presenting a certain perspective? Where does the article's funding come from? And what interest might the funders have in the outcome? All right, so now to talk a little bit about the framework and how we incorporated that into the process. So when we initially approached the conversation, the scientists that we partnered with knew that they wanted their students to, quote, use better sources, and they had some ideas that we as librarians might be able to help in this regard. By presenting through the framework to the group, we opened up the conversation to think more broadly about what they really wanted from their students. So during this conversation, using better sources became more nuanced. So we wanted students to be able to determine if a study that they hear about in the news is scientifically valid, or to question stories about science that they encounter in everyday life and have the tools and skills to evaluate them for their scientific merit. Bringing the framework into the discussion, practically speaking, made it a much more lively and interesting, but it also presented a challenge of corralling all of the great ideas that emerged and focusing the conversation back on the work at hand. It took time just teaching the scientists about the framework and creating and defining the terms that go along with it. However, it was worth the time and effort because we were able to come up with a much more nuanced set of goals, ideas, and end product. After a lot of thinking and wrangling, we came up with the following outcome and objective. So we wanted students to compare and contrast a scientific study and its popular news coverage in order to interpret media depictions of scientific research, with the objective being that replies to the assignment will be used to foreground and frame a future class discussion on scientific inquiry and communication. So we had a narrow, precise outcome that was designed to be one step in the process, not the be-all, end-all of an InfoLit tutorial. We wanted to include the larger goal of thinking about scientific inquiry, so we included that as an objective of the assignment. And speaking, just addressing some of the most relevant frames within the framework. So the most relevant frame was the information creation as a process. The students were not creating information sources themselves in this case, but they were examining how others had created them and the processes that they used. So some key components from the information creation as a process frame include the constraints, purposes, perceptions, and meanings associated with popular media presentations of science in contrast with the presentations from the scientists themselves. And this frame was prominent in large part because the module focused so heavily on contrasting the two formats, presenting scientific information and examining how these sources were written, and paying close attention to the author's choices about language, rhetorical devices, and the appearance of their work. So the secondary frames, the two other frames that played into this module were authority as constructed and contextual, and scholarship as a conversation. The key components from the authority and scholarship frame include prompting the students through our questioning to take a more critical and skeptical stance of scientific claims according to where and how they appear. And these frames were secondary largely due to the fact that the critical evaluation and skepticism were addressed by having the students respond to the questions. So what did we as librarians bring to the table? We brought practical skills, including searching for and locating articles and transcripts, securing copyright permissions for the video clip, stable links, and organizational strategies for our conversations and materials. We brought a theoretical background, which using the framework helped shape the conversation and articulate needs and ways to address those needs. And we brought a perspective because we as librarians think about issues of scholarly and popular communication all the time. So we have our perspective on that, which is a little bit different oftentimes from what our collaborators in the sciences thought about things. So we had a unique perspective from where they were coming from. And so finally, lessons learned and from implementing the module. Our module started out as a series of Google documents that instructors could link to, but many instructors found that additional step of linking to be a barrier. So it wasn't getting used much early on. So we converted it from the Google documents to its current format as a learning object in D2L, and implementation of the module has increased. And as far as more other future plans, we chose the articles that we did simply because they were mentioned in the John Oliver clip, but we would like to actually tailor some articles to course content. An example could be communicative diseases. In a communicative disease course could have articles about overprescription of antibiotics, which is a real example from one teacher that has used the module. So perhaps we could develop an article bank, or instructors could provide topics and librarians could find the relevant popular articles and scholarly articles to go along with them. And then we also are interested in expanding the program. So not all CISGS sections use the module even still, so we can still expand. And I'm also interested in the idea of trying to adapt it for use within science courses. So the CISGS courses, as I said before, are for non-science majors. And I'm interested in trying to find a way to get this into the hands of some science majors as well. Particularly at an introductory course level, like a 101. So I have worked with the Introductory Fisheries and Wildlife 101 course in the past, and I'm trying to come up with ways that I could find some articles about, fisheries and wildlife related topics or ecology, that I could present this to the instructors with the idea that they would be able to use it in their class. And then my last couple of slides are just some image credits. And with that, I think I can stop sharing and pass the baton over to Ed.
Okay, thank you, Eric. All right, I'm going to go ahead and now share my screen. I'll share my PowerPoint presentation here. And go ahead and start that presentation. All right, hopefully you all can see that. Good afternoon, my name is Ed Eckel, and I'm the Engineering and Applied Sciences Librarian at the Western Michigan University Libraries in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The title of my presentation is Flipping the Engineering Library Instruction Session. This session is basically the presentation that I gave in August at the Michigan Instruction Exchange Conference at Mott Community College. I'm going to describe a teaching strategy that I adopted called a flipped classroom, with which I'm sure many of you are already familiar. I used this strategy to kind of change up how I approached a number of information literacy sessions for freshman engineering students at Western. Let me make sure that my slides are advancing here. There we go. So what I want to do is give you some background as to why I decided to try this way of instructing the students I work with, how I prepared to do this, how I tried to assess what level of search competency students were able to reach, and what the advantages and disadvantages of using this method of teaching were. And finally, I'll talk about what I hope to do in the future. I'm sure that many of you, like me, have at times felt like the teacher in that movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where you find that you're repeating yourself over and over again, saying the same things in class after class, especially when you're doing an information literacy session for multiple sections of the same class. And I'm sure that you've seen this look on your students' faces at times. How demoralizing. When I'm teaching the same basic prep, class after class, I struggle with enthusiasm, both my own and that of the students. I've never wanted my teaching to be boring or tedious or assembly line, so this is how I tried to change the way I teach one particular set of classes. Let me start by talking about what I do at Western. I am the only librarian for the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences at Western, which has so the college has about 3,000 students and covers many of the major engineering disciplines: mechanical, civil engineering, chemical engineering, electrical engineering, and also computer science. Most of the incoming freshmen, engineering freshmen, and some transfer students in the College of Engineering have to take a required course called IEE 1020, or Technical Communication. And this is basically the freshman writing seminar for engineering and computer science students. There are usually between 12 to 18 sessions of these per semester. All students in the course have to write a 12 to 14 page research paper on a technical topic. Basically, they have to identify an applied science problem and try to come up with a potential solution for that problem. All these classes come to the library for an instruction session to show them how to research their topics, and I do the instruction for almost all of these classes. So these are the basic skills that I teach in those sessions. My instruction has been of necessity focused on giving them the skills to complete the research paper. So they need to be able to come up with search terms for the topics that they've selected. They need to be able to find background information. So I have them use a collection of engineering eBooks and handbooks called Knovel. They have to find some scholarly engineering articles. So they use the Engineering Village database. And then of course, they also have to navigate our link resolver. So they need to be able to find the full text of the articles that they find. So I've been doing this now for 12 years. And while I've been able to tweak my instruction to try to improve it, the format of the assignment that the professors gives their students, the time constraints that I deal with in the classroom, especially given that most of my I want to say one thing. Can everybody hear me? Dawn?
Hi, Ed. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I saw somebody saying something about not being, and I was worried I didn't unmute my microphone. Okay, so most of my sessions are 50 minutes long. So, and the reluctance of the various instructors to allow me to do anything more active like problem-based learning means that my instruction has tended to be very routine and predictable. And the other thing that I increasingly became aware of and really did not like was the generally passive nature of students in these sessions. I mean, they're already freshmen. For many of them, especially the first semester, this is their first time in the library. And they would come in, sit down, boot up their computers, and then they would just sit there looking at me, waiting for me to tell them what to do next. And I decided I really wanted the students to be in the driver's seat, not me. I wanted them to be driving the car. So I'd heard of this instructional method called the flipped classroom. I'd been reading articles about it in the Chronicle of Higher Ed and other education periodicals. So for me, this seemed like a good method to both give students some practice ahead of the library session, which I think can't hurt, and force them to take a more active role in their classroom learning. As you can see from the examples in this slide, the basic idea of active learning, which is the key to the flipped classroom, has been around for a long time, going all the way back to the Socratic method. In recent years, it's revolved around trying to make students take charge of their learning in the classroom. Flipped classroom is currently defined by Abe Sekera and Dawson, the authors who I show you on the slide right now, as an active learning technique that involves moving information transmission activities outside the classroom and using the in-class time for active, often social or group learning. Students must usually complete some kind of pre-activity before the class so that they are ready for the classwork. In the summer of 2015, I began planning what I wanted to do because this is the point where I really wanted to try this out. I had already had video screencasts that I'd created as classroom support materials for students who either had missed my sessions or who needed refreshers. And these videos covered a lot of what I usually taught in the session. So all I needed was to try this out with a class. That summer, I talked to the course coordinator and main instructor, Tom Schwartz, in the Industrial and Entrepreneurial Engineering Department to see what he thought of this idea. Mr. Schwartz coordinates all the sections of this course, and he sets the learning objectives. So all the instructors, both the full-time instructors and the adjunct instructors, have to follow his lead. So his participation was really important. I explained to him that I was hoping his students could watch a series of 4 or 5 videos ahead of the library session, and complete a short pre-class exercise using Google Forms that would get them practicing the skills that I introduced in the videos. And these skills were basically brainstorming keywords, using a couple of the databases, and then learning how to access our full text materials. And I told them that I could even send him the results of this pre-assignment ahead of time so he could also see how his students had done. And then the plan was that when his students came to the library, I would basically get them started searching with very little introduction. And then I would hopefully be spending most of my time and energy walking around, assisting them one-on-one. Again, the students would be in the driver's seat, not me. He was intrigued and he was willing to give it a try. And I could tell he was a little skeptical since these instruction sessions have basically been taught this way for nearly 20 years, predating my arrival here at Western. And he did openly worry that his students would not complete the videos in the pre-assignment, even if they were required. So let me give you a picture of what my LibGuide looks like. So this is the LibGuide for the IEE 1020 course. And I've highlighted on here the page of the LibGuide that I created where I put the links to my videos. I also posted a link on this guide, on this page, to the Google Forms assignment. And that's where that little red box is that says access this quiz here. And I'll put this URL up again at the end of the session for those of you who want to copy it down. So this is the page that students would be accessing in order to do the pre-assignment. And these are the tasks that I asked students to do after watching the 4 videos on the previous page. These were the most important skills that students needed to practice before coming to the library for their instruction session. So I wanted them to be able to articulate their topic as a sentence. I wanted them to come up with and suggest 5 to 10 search terms or keywords. I wanted them to be able to find a relevant article and a relevant book chapter. And then finally, I wanted them for the article to be able to see whether the article was available in full text and how do they know. So it forced them to have to go through the link resolver to understand the topic a little bit better. The first year I began to try these flipped sessions was 2015, 2016. All of these sessions were with Tom Schwartz's sections. He teaches 2 sections a semester, so 4 sections a year. I was hoping that the next year, 2016, 2017, I could convince some of the other instructors to try this approach, but no one was willing. So the next year was also a pilot or test year. But finally last year, I was able to convince several of the other IEE 1020 instructors to try this approach. Those first 2 years that I taught this format, I didn't do any assessment other than reading through students' responses on the pre-assignment, which the instructor assigned as a quiz that students had to complete. Reading their responses in Google Forms enabled me to see where students were in their skills and if there were any major problems that I needed to address once they got in the classroom. Last year, our Associate Dean, Mary O'Kelly, asked all of us to try to do some type of assessment in the classes we teach. Now, since I already had the pre-assignment set up in Google Drive to collect students' responses, I decided to create a rubric to evaluate those responses over the course of this academic year. So these are the rubric levels that I used, and they worked very well for the particular exercises that I was having students doing. So the lowest level is minimal progress, and it indicated that the student either hadn't done the activity or that what they had turned in was too generic for their topic. Significant progress indicated that students' keywords or the sources that they found related to their topics, but only in a very broad or general sense. And having reached or achieved competency indicated that students' keywords or the sources they found related very specifically to their chosen topic. And if you email me after this session, I will be happy to send you a copy of the rubric that I use to assess their performance. Each task that students had to complete related to an information literacy competency from our own in-house list that we had developed at WMU. So this is a set of competencies that I pulled out of Western Michigan University Library's information literacy competency list that we had developed. And our in-house list was based on the ACRL information literacy framework and some other information literacy competencies used by other library and composition associations. So the rubric was designed to assess these aspects of the competencies. Out of 27 sections of IEE 1020 that I worked with in the past academic year, I was able to do 11 flipped classroom sessions. So not as many as I would have liked, but for these sessions, 228 students total completed the pre-assignment. So now I'd like to share with you the rubric assessment results. So here are the results of the student assessment for brainstorming keywords. So level 1, the lowest level, is the red section of the pie. The middle level is the orange section, and then the highest level is the tan section. Students did okay on this, with over 50% scoring at the middle level or significant progress level, but with over a quarter still at the minimal or no progress level because they either had not submitted keywords or the keywords they'd submitted were too broad and general for their topics. This is a skill that freshman engineering students really struggle with because they haven't had enough course content to develop enough of a conceptual background to have a sense of useful search terms for their topics. As far as finding a book chapter, students did significantly better at this. They had to search the Knovel Engineering eBooks site with their keywords and find a relevant book chapter, and over 50% of students scored at the achieved competency level. As far as finding articles, students did very well in this task as well, with 68% of students able to find an article relevant to their paper topic in the Engineering Village database. However, given that I was only evaluating them on one particular article citation that they turned in, this is perhaps not surprising. The results might have been different if I were evaluating their actual full search strategy or their full results retrieval in Engineering Village. Now, in addition to looking at what they actually did, I wanted to look at how frequently students were clicking on and using the video links that I'd supplied in my LibGuide. This gives me a sense of how useful these videos are for students. So here's the screenshot of my LibGuide, which you saw earlier. I have the links to the videos on this page basically in order of priority. So the brainstorming keywords video is first, because that's what I want them to start with. And then I want them to move into finding background information in Knovel, so they move further down on the page. And finally, at the bottom is accessing full text articles, which would come after them learning how to use Engineering Village. So let me show you usage for these videos over the last 3 years. So this figure shows you usage for each of the videos from 2015 and 16 through to last year, 2017, 2018. The first thing you might notice is that usage of the videos increased considerably this past year once more sessions utilized the flipped classroom model. Now note that I've organized this graph in the order that the video links appear on my LibGuide for the course. So keywords at the far left would be at the top of the LibGuide page. Accessing full text over on the right is at the bottom of the LibGuide page. And what you can see is there's a definite pattern moving from left to right here in this bar graph, where the links further down on the page, such as accessing full text and finding articles, are used less frequently than the ones that were further up on the page. So it really looks like students start with the first link, and then more and more students skip the succeeding ones. I'm not really sure what to do about this. I did go back after looking at this data earlier this summer and redo the Knovel eBooks video, shortening it from 6 minutes to a little over 2 minutes. At the very least, I can tell that students are using the videos, but I haven't yet asked them what they think of these videos. So let me talk about the advantages I see from doing information literacy instruction sessions with the flipped classroom model. First, now, instead of spending a lot of my instructional time standing at the front of the room, telling students what links and drop downs to click on, I'm spending more time walking around the room, working one-on-one with students on search strategies, topic development, which a lot of these students need a lot of help with, and keywords. Students are spending their time searching, clicking on links, reading articles. They're a lot more motivated, they seem less passive, and they're also more enthusiastic. They're asking questions, they're getting help, and they're not just sitting and having to listen to me drone on. Finally, for me, these sessions are much more enjoyable, mainly because I'm not doing the very same thing every session, but instead, each session is unique, as my interactions with students are the basis for the instruction. Now, there are some disadvantages, and I can see there's some questions about having students work in small groups. So let me some of your questions might be answered in a second here. There are some disadvantages. So my way of approaching this is not perfect. Due to the emphasis of the instructors on students learning, quote, how to complete the research paper assignment, unquote, the in-class work is not really social. Students are working on their own topics individually rather than working in groups or teams. I think this method would be even more powerful if the students were in teams, helping each other with keywords, search strategies, and suggesting good sources. Also, not all faculty are ready for the flipped session. Some instructors aren't willing to have their students do the pre-assignment, or they don't make the pre-assignment and the videos mandatory. If the pre-assignment and the videos aren't mandatory, basically students won't do them, and then the model fails. And also, the pre-class work may not necessarily fit what the instructors are having their students do before my session. So one does have to be flexible with instructor priorities. Now, the other issue is the students have to actually do the work. Not all students complete the pre-assignment. I check this ahead of time, and if not enough students have done it, like say less than 3/4 of the class, then I end up doing a traditional instruction session. And this is partly why for the sessions that I did last year, only 11 were full flipped classroom sessions. But interestingly enough, if 2 or 3 students have neglected to do the pre-assignment or watch the videos, they still catch up to everybody else by following along with what their classmates are doing. As I walk around the room, I often can't tell the difference between the students who've done the pre-assignment and the ones who haven't. Perhaps this indicates there's some inter-student learning going on during my in-person session. And of course, finally, some students just need additional help from me with the basic search skills that they began using in the pre-class exercise, but maybe they didn't quite understand, especially things not covered in the videos, such as Boolean logic or interlibrary loan. So in the future, I really would like to be able to use this approach with all the IE 1020 sessions, but one does have to be flexible rather than rigid in working with faculty. So I set up the sessions based on how the faculty member has prepped their students for the visit. Also, given that my assessment currently only covers what students are able to do ahead of time, it would be nice to have some kind of brief in-class assessment to see how they do near the end of the in-person class. And finally, in an ideal world, I would love to structure the class like a group or team activity so that students have to work together and help each other. As mentioned earlier, I would also like to find out from the students more directly how useful the videos have been for them. So I'm gonna kind of stop now. Here's in brief my contact information, so let me know if you'd like me to send you any of the materials that I've used to prepare this. And I'm going to now stop my presentation and try to pull Zoom back up here. Here we go. I'm going to, okay. I'm assuming you're no longer seeing my, oh, here we go, stop share. There we go.
There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eric and Ed. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing. We have time for questions. And one of the questions I saw that was in the chat, you can either put your questions in chat or pull your cursor down to the bottom and you can unmute yourself and ask. We have about 65 people in the room right now, so quite a few, so we might get some questions. But the one question for Eric that I saw is somebody wanted to know what level of courses you were doing the, what was the question? The module for the non-majors. Was it like 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, Eric?
So the courses were 200 level. Yeah, and one of the things that kept coming up again and again in our conversations with the instructors was that this could potentially be the last science class that these students would ever take because they're not science majors, and so they're taking this non-science major course and they might never take another science class again. So they really wanted to, you know, what do we want to try to impart with them as they go off into their lives? You know, what do they need to know about science to be an informed citizen? So that was kind of one of the things that we really thought about a lot when we were having our discussions.
Thank you. I think there's a question for Ed in the chat right now. Let's see.
Myself, here we go. So Professor Schwartz has been pretty positive about this. I think he was kind of surprised when it actually seemed to work okay. And I think he was pretty pleased at how active his students were. And, you know, I don't think his students, certainly they didn't do any worse in their research papers. And I have a feeling they were probably maybe a little bit better, although I can't prove this. But yeah, so I think, after the first 2 years, he was able to kind of encourage the other instructors who teach the course to give this a shot. So, so yeah, he's been pretty positive about it. So now we pretty much do this every semester. And for the other instructors, I have a few instructors who are willing to do it and then still some holdouts. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
Okay, there's another question in chat. Let's see, I think this is for Eric. How exactly did you get permission to embed the John Oliver clip?
So that was not something that I worked on directly. We have a course materials department that does a lot of electronic course packs that requires securing copyright permissions for all sorts of different things that the instructors want to include in their course readings. So they have a lot of experience and they know how to kind of go about getting copyright permissions on things. So we went through our course materials people and they came back and said that it was done. So I'm not exactly sure what they did, but it was the video. I think the original clip is, you know, over 20 minutes long, and we included, you know, just a couple of minutes of that. So I think that, you know, cutting it down always makes it a little bit more compatible to the copyright holders, you know, if you're just having a little bit rather than the whole thing. And yeah, so that's the best answer that I could give for that.
All right, there's a couple more questions for Ed in chat.
Yeah, regarding what the in-class assignment was. So once students completed the pre-assignment questions, when they came in, basically their job was to start with the topic idea that they were developing with the professor and to start coming up with search terms or to immediately begin searching for materials for their research paper. Now, in most cases, these are freshmen. Their topics are still really broad when they come into the library session with me. So some of the work that I'm doing is walking around trying to help them focus their topics or come up with something that's more properly scoped for a 12 to 14 page paper. So what they're doing in class is basically searching for information to help them complete that research paper. And I see somebody mentioned, Doreen mentioned about having students working in small groups. The only time I've done that with these students before was I used to have them do keyword brainstorming in small groups of 3 or 4 students. So I used to have them use the whiteboard and whiteboard walls in our classroom. But as fun as that activity was and as useful, it took up so much of my class time that it didn't leave me a lot of class time for having them use Knovel to search for books or use Engineering Village just to find articles. So I've since kind of scoped that down drastically. So I don't do any kind of small group work right now, especially with the 50-minute sessions. It's really hard.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, there are in general between 20 and 22 students in each section. Some vary drastically because some of these students don't even show up for the library session. So, but I would say in general, on average, about 20 students per section. And they're, like I said, they're about between 12 and 18 of these per semester.
Eric, there's a question in chat for you as well about desire to learn and about stats for the completion of the module.
Yes. Yeah, whether or not we could pull stats from D2L to see how many times it was accessed. I do believe that that's possible. I don't work with D2L directly very much, so I haven't done that, but I think that we could do that. Yeah, because with the authentication, that you would see specific students and who has accessed the module. I saw that question and was just kind of clicking around in D2L right now to see if I could figure out how to pull that up, but no such luck on the fly.
All right, I think there's a question to the both of you. For engineering instruction, do you feel there is a need for an advanced level instruction session?
Yeah, I would love it if I could I do some advanced level sessions for some upper level classes, usually junior or senior level, particularly senior level because we have senior design sessions. I don't do as many of them as I would like. But yeah, the instruction for this particular course is very minimal. It's basically teaching students how to find stuff. The instructor does build into his course some evaluation of resources. So students they complete an assignment that I don't have anything really to do with, where they have to find an article from a journal and an article from a trade magazine and then compare them. I've created some videos to support that on what a scholarly journal in engineering looks like and what a trade magazine article looks like. But I don't really get time to get into any of that in the sessions. And I don't really get into anything more advanced, more advanced Boolean searching or selecting different databases, depending on your topic. I don't get into searching patents. So yeah, I would love there to be an advanced level instruction session, but the engineering college is really difficult. A lot of instructors just don't want to give up that time because there's so much time devoted in class to covering content. So, even the senior design classes, what they usually do is they just tell their teams to contact me individually for consultations if they need help. But a lot of even the senior design classes have been kind of reluctant to bring me in just to teach. And often, I would have to review all of the Engineering Village and Knovel stuff all over again. So before I could take them to the next level. So it is a little frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any other questions? I have a question for Eric. What what do you actually do as a liaison to the fisheries and wildlife department? Do they ask you questions? Or, you know, how does that work? That just seems interesting to me.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's a liaison assignment. I think kind of like any other liaison to a department where you know, I provide for their informational needs, whatever those might be. So I do some instruction with the Fisheries and Wildlife 101 course, which is
Oh, wow. Okay.
it's a lot. Not I don't teach the course, but I do some, you know, library instruction and information literacy instruction for those students. And there are other courses that have, you know, research assignments that have had me come in to, you know, do brief, you know, bibliographic instruction sessions on how to, you know, search Web of Science and things like that. I've partnered with one faculty member in particular has been very open to research collaborations. So he likes to do a lot of review articles and has pulled me into several of those projects where we talk about what he's looking for and we kind of come up with a search strategy together, and then I kind of execute the search and gather all of the results and package them up neatly and hand them over to him in his lab, and they actually, you know, read everything and synthesize it with all of the information that they know as subject experts, and then they, you know, write their paper, and I kind of write a little short, you know, section on the methods as far as, you know, how the search was conducted, and then he submits those papers to scholarly journals. So it's a really great collaboration where, you know, I'm able to kind of be a small cog in the machine that is producing some scientific articles.
That's great. You know, we obviously don't have one of those departments here, and I just was wondering. Thank you. Anybody else? You know, maybe Eric, you could put your email in chat in case if anybody wants to ask you a question offline or something.
Yeah, I could definitely do that. Let's see, to everyone.
All right, are we good? Any other questions?
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys, and thank you to everyone who attended from Indiana, North Carolina, Michigan, and thank you so much. And we'll let you. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dawn.